You buy Bitcoin, you hold it for more than 4 years, Joe. That's my advice to everybody.
Fair to say you simply flooded the system with money.
Yes, we did. That's another way to think about it.
Where does it come from? Do you just print it?
We print it digitally.
I'm very bullish on the long-term viability of Bitcoin.
I was going to say, did that surprise you?
That surprised me how much that's gone up.
Hey, Internet, welcome back to another episode of New Foundations, the podcast brought to you by Acropolis, the Bitcoin treasury company. Back in the studio this week, as always, with my co-founder and CEO, Chase Palmieri, and very excited to be joined by Mike Germano. Mike is the current president of PubKey and the former president of Bitcoin Magazine. When we reached out to have you on the show, you were still at Bitcoin Magazine, but really excited to dive into what's going on at PubKey, and then in general, just, you know, Bitcoin Magazine has been really influential in the space recently. I'm not sure if anyone realized what's been happening with the president and whatnot, but it's mostly because of them. So yeah, welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you for having me, and sorry for having to move around a bunch of meetings, but happy to finally get on the show.
No worries. We had to have you on. So I think let's go ahead and start there. Why leave Bitcoin Magazine at a time like this to join PubKey when the mainstream is coming? So why leave the biggest publication in the space at a time like this?
That is a great question. Obviously, when I went over to Bitcoin Magazine, I known David Bailey for a while, and he'll say I was the first kind of media executive. I was over at Vice Media that saw Bitcoin Magazine. I'm like, look, I know Bitcoin's the future. This is it. There's something kind of special there, when all the other media outlets were still like, this isn't anything. This is, Bitcoin's where you go to buy drugs. But started a relationship and always was supportive of Bitcoin Magazine, joined right before the 21 conference. So I was catching up with David, and I was like, knowing El Salvador was about to happen, I'm like, this is about to take off. So I kind of came out of retirement to go start that crazy journey. Was proud to kind of, I thought print was important, even though we're a digital business, but kind of relaunching print, giving that identity. And I just knew what opportunity we had as a media company. So where the conversation was going, and truthfully, how our industry and the community needed that as a media company. So built a lot of that over 4 years. I think I told David I would give him 2 years, and I was there for almost 4. So built all that up, helped kind of increase globally where we were going. But that was a huge part of the business. Was also licensing that, whether that was in Ukraine right before the war when I was out there, or Japan or Switzerland, helping launch kind of what we were doing in Amsterdam and Middle East. So there was a lot of travel. And to be honest with you, sometimes that's a young man's game. I'm not too old, but I have kids who are 11 and 9, and they think I'm still cool. So I'm at that stage where they still think I'm cool. And, being home more is more valuable to me. And, the next stage of Bitcoin Magazine, getting the company and getting everyone else to believe that we're a media company and we deserve to be listened to is kind of getting that boulder pushed up the hill. And the next stage is, the other people can come in and grow that to where it needs to be. And it was, I think I had accomplished a lot, and it was kind of a good stopping point. And then, why PubKey? And I get that question a lot. Well, the first time I walked in, I told Thomas not to open the bar and restaurant. I used to have some restaurants in New York when I sold my company, had some fun, lost a lot of money during COVID. And Thomas during COVID's like, I'm buying the dive bar that I love so much, and we're going to make it into kind of like a Bitcoin bar. I was like, it felt like Billy Madison, where I'm like, don't do it. Don't, this is a big mistake. And he did not listen to me, thank God, and started it. And, it was important to capture the energy. I love meeting with people in person. Sometimes Bitcoin, is so digital over Twitter. I think meeting people in person, sharing that energy is important. And I just found myself more and more at PubKey, where it was special. And, look, I grew up and lived in the city for almost 20 years, grew up all around New York. That's my city. And being able to build something there is exciting. And the truth is, PubKey as a brand itself, I think is, becoming the mecca, like you said before. Bitcoin Magazine, we got Donald Trump to come speak at our conference, talk about Bitcoin. Well, when Trump actually spent Bitcoin, he went to PubKey. So, there is, it's really important for that. And where the conference is massive, obviously enjoyed that. And that's, one time a year in the US. I mean, at PubKey, there's a Bitcoin thing happening probably 3 nights a week, and it seems like every single week there's something big, whether we're bringing in the Senator Lummis or we're bringing Democrat Congressman Richie Torres, or we're outside the politicians. You have Adam Back, coming in on a Wednesday night. He's speaking from 10 to 11:30. He leaves, and the next thing you know, 30 minutes later, there's like a karaoke of a bunch of like lawyers that are in our space, and kind of flipping that around, I think is going to be really important to Bitcoin. If you ask me why, the tech people that are going to be involved in Bitcoin are already here. And if you're a techie and you like the technology, we don't need to sell you coming into Bitcoin. The finance people, a lot of people you deal with, the numbers speak for themselves. They're gonna be involved in Bitcoin or not, right? Like, we don't have to do that. The next layer of people coming into Bitcoin, this is a social layer. These are people that, I don't want to say that Bitcoin is a lifestyle brand, right? But there's a huge social layer that goes along with Bitcoin. And it's important to show these are fun people. These are people who care about things, right? They're going to argue with you nonstop, but there is a culture there, and that's something that we need to encourage, and we need to build community around that. So the next wave of people coming into Bitcoin will be the social layer. And where is that going to happen? And so being able to build the physical place for that and grow that, I saw as a great new challenge.
Yeah, one of Chase's previous businesses was a restaurant, so I'm sure he would have given the same advice and said, "Don't start it." But for what it's worth, I actually probably get the most FOMO. I don't get a lot of FOMO, but when it comes to PubKey, I get a lot of FOMO because I'm down in Austin, Chase is in San Francisco, so we're not there a lot, but there's really some historic moments happening. When Donald Trump was buying the cheeseburger with the tallow fries, that was just incredible levels of FOMO. But speaking of FOMO, on that same note, we were supposed to record on Tuesday, and then you sent us an email, and you said, "I've got a very important meeting in DC." Was this for a new PubKey location or something else you would like to share? Just curious, anything that you can share.
Gotcha. There's some things I can't share. There's some things I can share. Part of the excitement was we were actually getting the keys that day for our new location in DC. So
PubKey keys.
PubKey keys, yes. So not your keys, not your bar. So like a key day. So, that was it was last minute. So we were getting that. We had a couple of other big meetings, and once again, timing worked out well. The team has spent a long time thinking about what the next location was going to be, what worked, and look, everything kind of came together, especially obviously with the Trump administration coming in. And if you just look at the tweets, how many Bitcoiners are now in DC nonstop? So it's a great opportunity. And part of what we've been able to show in New York was that Bitcoiners are just normal people, and how can you sell Bitcoin by kind of having a social element side of it and kind of welcoming them into Bitcoin instead of hitting them over the head with it. DC needs that more than ever. When it was like leaked to the press because we took over, allegedly, we haven't made it public yet, a historic location that a lot of people loved, and they were like, "These damn Bitcoiners are coming in! Like, how dare they?" And we have to change that conversation because they have opinions of what Bitcoin is. There's no better way of doing that than almost a pub, a bar, a restaurant that's like inviting them into your house, and saying, "Hey, let's share a plate, let's share a beer." And so the biggest opportunity to change minds with Bitcoin and build communities, absolutely in DC. It's a huge undertaking for us. I think it's like 5 times the size of the one we have in New York. So it's gonna be a massive undertaking. And so it's kind of all hands on deck for that one. So that's that. And then the exciting things I can't tell you about, which I'll tell you about in 6 months when you see. But it's a lot of things that you build, especially on the consumer side, retail side. That's and Chase, as you said before, if owning a restaurant, how much time and how many meetings you have to go into this that you can't talk about it for over a year. But you have to have this vision, you have to plan it, and you have to have those meetings. So some I can't share, wish I could, but the big one is that PubKey is going to be coming to DC, and it's going to be, I think it's obviously going to be our best one yet, but there'll be a lot more.
Embrace the future of corporate finance with Acropolis, your strategic partner for a Bitcoin treasury strategy. We're the experts your business needs. Acropolis offers trusted Bitcoin advisory. We provide you with an outsourced Bitcoin strategy officer, world-class research, and a creative financing team, and more, so you can navigate Bitcoin's market with confidence and acumen. Best-in-class custody with multi-institution custody. Eliminate the risk of loss while maintaining full control of real Bitcoin. Acropolis exclusively uses multi-institution custody as the safest and easiest way for businesses to hold Bitcoin. Bitcoin-only solutions. The Acropolis platform is designed for businesses of all sizes to seamlessly manage their Bitcoin treasury, and we focus solely on Bitcoin to offer you the most specialized services available. Adding Bitcoin to your balance sheet is just the beginning. With Acropolis, you're not just adopting Bitcoin, you're mastering its strategic use to create and maintain value for generations. Take the first step and start your corporate Bitcoin journey with Acropolis. Book your free consultation today at acropolistreasury.com/book and start implementing our proven strategies within days.
Well, maybe I'm going to ask another question that you can't necessarily speak to because it's kind of about forward-looking plans for PubKey. And so when I look at what's going on with PubKey, obviously you have the New York location, now a much larger location in DC coming online soon, and you coming on board, somebody with a lot of ambition and ability to execute. I kind of wonder if there's an opportunity, and just hear me out. If there's an opportunity for PubKey to almost become like the Bitcoiner consulate, where you have these locations in different major cities, where besides obviously everything you're doing on the social layer with the bar and the food and the snacks and the meetups and all that, I wonder if it'd be useful for there to be a kind of a Bitcoin consulate where Bitcoiners could come and receive certain services that are related to their Bitcoin needs, and you guys can kind of show up for them in that way.
That's a great question. So really what is the term pub comes from a public place, right? It was originally there because it had to be a vehicle where the public could actually meet and do things and have conversations. And really the best way to make sure that's a sustainable business for the staff and the space that's needed was to kind of sell alcohol and beer, right? Like it's there for that micro lease of the 2 hours you spend in a public place in New York. Having a physical place also gives not only just credibility, but it gives, people know where to go. Press knows who to reach out to. I mean, like, look at all the press PubKey gets, whether it's Fox News or other places that want to talk about Bitcoin. Like when Bitcoin hit 100K, a bunch of news outlets show up at PubKey. Why? We're not Bitcoin's, corporate office, right? But having a physical place allows that to happen. So there's two parts to your question. Does PubKey become a consulate or an embassy, right? I do think that's going to be happening in DC. Absolutely. I think that this is going to be, this is not only a home. I mean, we literally have Bitcoiners that just like walk into our bar at random times of day and they're just like, I'm here now. Like, and we're asking, okay. And like, well, I'm in New York. I had a, couple hour layover. I left the airplane. I'm just coming here to PubKey. I just want to be here. I want to say I've been here. Right. So we feel, we understand that having that physical place people want to go to, and understanding what we could be doing as, the meetings we host a lot in New York, we're going to be doing that obviously in DC. There'll be a lot of policy discussion. Like once again, politicians keep coming to our place to discuss policy. So I guess that's, if we're thinking about that consulate or what those services can provide. And then the third part was how are we a matchmaker for other businesses that want to do this or want to offer these services, right? So whether that's how can your bar or restaurant accept Bitcoin, or how do you pay your employees in Bitcoin? A lot of those stories are better shared by the people who are part of it. And that's why we try to have that, that conference side of it. You're kind of having a drinking over a beer. But then the second part of your question, and in terms of the ambition side, the thing that got me excited was, Bitcoin meetups are good. They're great. Some of them have got maybe a little bit older or the problem is maybe they're too technical and they're not as inviting to people that are coming in. And what we've seen is PubKey has been a great way to invite people in to have that conversation about Bitcoin. And where I see it going is, love to have a physical place in every city, but why can't we kind of decentralize that a little bit and make, the PubKey drinking club that, meets every Thursday, whether that's in whatever city, you can have the social layer of that, that can meet up. And once again, if there's a groundswell and we see that there's opportunity, we maybe use those people as kind of the early adopters to go ahead and open a PubKey in that city. So I see this really as the kind of social excitement. I always joke that, you want to celebrate and commiserate with PubKey, we have to bring that. And, for the Vegas conference, I guess this is some alpha, but we're going to be blowing out the Vegas conference. We're going to be literally creating a Bitcoin variety show, with Marty Bent. We're going to be doing an awesome job of that. We got the coolest old showroom. We're going to set up all these kind of parties and events and bring everyone together. So PubKey goes on the road, and a lot of these conferences and events want to have something PubKey because we understand how Bitcoiners want to kind of celebrate and what they want to connect with. We're not some lame brand that's like but Bitcoiners want to do this. We're like, well, actually, we know them. We know what they want to do, and they feel comfortable with us. So we know that there's a responsibility with how Bitcoiners connect in real life, and kind of going back to celebrating, commiserating. But what we've fallen on is we have a big role of having to help inform and educate. And once again, we did a lot of that. Bitcoin Magazine partners a lot with PubKey. In terms of that content, it's a place for some of our best, reporters to go and interview folks. So, I look at PubKey as kind of the Madison Square Garden in New York, and everyone kind of, that's a Bitcoiner comes by. So, we are very ambitious. Obviously, that's one of the reasons why I joined, is because this is the energy I have all the time. And Thomas is like, let's go, let's make a run at it. And I'm like, hell yeah. So those locations, how we can grow that, I think is going to have the biggest role in how our physical locations, I think, impact how normies, pre-coiners look at Bitcoin more than a lot of the blogs and media that get published.
So maybe before I move on to the next kind of set of questions, which is around SBR, it sounds like franchising is not off the table.
Franchise is definitely not off the table.
Cool. All right, cool. Well, we got to touch on the United States SBR. Just two quick questions here for you. So one, I actually heard you mention on a podcast with BTC Sessions and TJ Miller and those guys, and Guy Swan, that after the US, and this was before the US SBR was announced, you said once it is announced, there's going to be 3 countries that immediately announce right after. I might have missed it, but did those 3 other countries that you were aware of announce? And if not, are you able to say who those countries are or who you were expecting to announce?
Yeah. So in regards to that question was the countries that we've been talking to, and that was mostly my time at Bitcoin Magazine. They waiting for Trump to get in office, waiting to see how this was going to be set up and announced. Partially because they were afraid of the Biden backlash. I'm excited to see when it gets released the inventory of where all the Bitcoin is. I mean, there's fears that was the government actually selling it, but Biden's team specifically did things to kind of spook the market. Right after the Bitcoin conference, they moved the Bitcoin over to Coinbase, and so I think other countries were a little bit worried of how Biden could react. Waiting for once again there was an announcement as is passing by law. I don't want to say I do not want to say which countries, but those countries are just waiting because once America kind of says how it's going to be set up, they're going to want to follow that approach. One country kind of made an announcement, this is how much Bitcoin we have. And everyone thought, oh, they just bought, stock in a mining company or something like that. I'm like, no, this country has a ton of Bitcoin. So I think they've been amassing it in different ways. But I don't have any alpha on being able to share it to you which countries those are. But they're ones that I try to say they're ones that are in the conversation that you kind of hear about often. But yeah, I can't really tell you the names.
We know what's going to happen eventually. We won't have to be curious for too long.
Look, it has to happen, right? And look, David Bailey's probably a much better person to ask about some of these things on that. I know he gets the hype tweets all the time, like it's coming, it's this country, it's that country. But I can say now, kind of removed from that, especially when I was in that position, it was shocking by how many countries were asking us about this, how many people were interested, right? And I feel like it's a little bit like Fight Club. Like you just have one person in the government who's like orange pilled and they're like, yeah, I'm pushing this through. We got to do this. We got to do this. And the more that we can show success in politicians embracing it, I think the better it is. And from our side of PubKey, sometimes we get labeled as a Republican bar. We just had Richie Torres, the head of the crypto caucus, the leading Democrat for the crypto caucus, the one who really went after Gensler. He wanted to come to PubKey, wanted to meet with people, discuss, kind of crypto and Bitcoin positioning. So, it's not just a Republican thing. It's absolutely both sides. So that's important because even though I'm not a big fan of politicians, and unfortunately I was one back in the day, it's important for them to see not you need Bitcoiner support. It's if you go after Bitcoin, it's going to hurt you.
Absolutely. Shout out to David. 1 million Bitcoin is the floor. Indeed. We asked this question to Ben Workman last week and really interested to hear your answer. What's your favorite budget neutral way for the United States to acquire Bitcoin?
My favorite budget neutral way okay, that's a great question. my favorite budget neutral way would be that firing public employees and using their salary to buy Bitcoin. But I will say this: I hate to say this, I'm not a big fan of encouraging governments to buy Bitcoin. And I don't, not even just tax dollars. Like, I want people to build up their own personal strategic reserve, and not a big fan of the government buying it. I want them just to leave it alone. But more importantly, I just would rather be able to pay my taxes maybe in Bitcoin, or have them start accepting it as a payment, which they will never do. But
I've got to do that right now. That would be fantastic if that was possible.
yes. But no, yeah, the more I served in office when I was in college. I ran for public office, and I spent one term running a city called Hamden, Connecticut, which was a great eye-opening experience to understand budgets and unions and stuff. And man, unions were a massive problem, and just looking at the amount of waste that government spending had was absolutely eye opening. And how much people don't want to vote for the right things because they're afraid what people. Everyone wants more services and less taxes, and this is all coming to a head. So cut the government as much as you can, and use some of the proceeds for Bitcoin.
Is the reason you're saying that the United States wouldn't accept Bitcoin for tax payment is because that's kind of the classic, we force you to be in dollars at some point, in the year, and if we let them pay in Bitcoin, then, they could theoretically escape the dollars altogether?
Yeah, it's just that'll never happen.
Okay, interesting. All right. Well, you would know better than we would. You got a couple ears to the ground. So these next couple questions, got to talk Bitcoin equities, MicroStrategy. So I heard you on that same BTC Sessions interview. A couple of these questions are from listening in on that and hearing some of your hot takes. But you talked kind of about, I don't know if it's worth calling your theory, but kind of this premise that Saylor is open sourcing the capital markets playbook, not because it's in his best interest to acquire the most Bitcoin, but because he wants it to kind of become normalized as an arbitrage strategy on Wall Street to give him cover and make sure that the forces that be don't come down on him in particular. Can you maybe speak to that? Did I summarize that correctly?
Yeah, I think you did a better job of summarizing it than I actually did, so I appreciate that. Look, and especially in my time at Bitcoin Magazine, we helped launch Bitcoin for Corporations, which partnership between Bitcoin Magazine and MicroStrategy. To Bitcoin Magazine's job is to educate folks on Bitcoin, and once again, you can look at it two ways. Some people are huge Michael Saylor fans, so everything Michael Saylor does, they absolutely love. And then we have massive skeptics on one end that think this is all some type of ploy, and he's a psyop. If you kind of sit there and think about it in the middle and go, okay, why is he really doing this? Why is he kind of trying to get every other company to do it? My personal opinion would be that if he's found this cheat code that everyone says he does, well, at what point does the SEC or someone say, okay, we can't do this? This is not something companies should be allowed to do. So if, the brighter that MicroStrategy shines, and the more that he makes all these other CFOs of public companies look bad, you don't want to be alone when you do that. And so the more that he can get other companies to adopt this strategy, the safer it is for him and his company to not get unfortunately looked at and decided you as a company can't do that. You need to sell your Bitcoin, return it back, and we'll screw up his. They might just come after him. And so his best insurance policy is to have as many companies as they can adopt part of this as their strategy.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And I think I'd tend to agree. And then I heard you also say that when you do chat with Saylor from time to time, you basically just get an earful and he just spends 3 hours yelling at you. I'm assuming that's, because of your time at Bitcoin Magazine. Maybe it had to do with the coverage or the overlapping work on Bitcoin for Corporations, and that you're not getting that earful as much anymore. But what was he upset about? Like, what was he taking issue with?
Look, Saylor's in an interesting position, right? He's uniquely become a important face in the Bitcoin movement, just for corporations, but as someone that everyone tends to say, okay, this is the expert, and why not? He was or chairman of the CEO of one of the largest Bitcoin holders. the problem is Michael Saylor is way too smart, right? So Michael Saylor is very smart. I'm not smart. But I do have people skills and I'm outgoing and I guess maybe I'm a little bit funny or can take a joke. That's not something maybe that Saylor's the best at. So I would say, some of the joke in some of our conversations about, or when I would get yelled at, was more about maybe what I was doing at Bitcoin Magazine, and now we laugh because I don't think he finds PubKey to be fun at all. I don't think he doesn't like people to spend Bitcoin, and we're like, yo, spend your Bitcoin and buy hot dogs. So I think he once asked us like what makes PubKey special. One of our guys said our hot dogs, and he found that answer to be very upsetting. So we've been trolling him about hot dogs. And like we did the Fox interview, and all of a sudden, the interview with Laura Trump, she has David Sachs on, she has Michael Saylor, and she has Thomas from PubKey at PubKey. And if you ask me, I think his section was the best, that explained Bitcoin the most. And like, look, we're talking about why a dive bar is important because it's a socioeconomic thing where everyone can be part of it. And this is how we show people how to use Bitcoin. And then you cut to Saylor in his massive mansion, and he's, very smart, talking about things that might be overhead the Fox News people that are watching it, over their head a little bit. So, he thanked everyone but us. He's like, look at all these people on the show. It was so great, but PubKey. So we're like, oh, good. I think he doesn't maybe enjoy our style, but we think, to be very blunt with you, our style, how we talk about things and how we look at things, I'm a big, non-KYC fan. I'm not, I think maybe a little bit more, I guess, traditional Bitcoin, and I believe in helping, fund open source development and things that maybe, it's not aligned with him, which is totally fine. And he's used to, he seems like an 80s, 90s corporate guy. Like, they're going to put that pressure on you to sit there and think why their position is important. He's got a lot more to lose than anybody else if Bitcoin changes from his vision of what it is. But, I'm not in the job to just simp for Saylor all the time and say everything he does is great. We have to sit there and fire back because it's supposed to be peer-to-peer, not peer-to-corporation.
Bitcoiners are of the most objective thinkers on earth. And yeah, Saylor is definitely a unique character. I got to meet him once last year at that Bitcoin for Corporations event. And I always say that it felt like he was analyzing my entire existence while speaking to him, which is like it's a very weird thing to have happen while you're small talking with someone.
And look, what I like about him, what I respect about him, is he's super intense. So when you do have those conversations, you need to be, you're on there. And I think, I use humor as a lot to try to get messages across, and sometimes people that might not resonate with everyone. So I did, unfortunately, at that event, bring up how when we had this big halving live stream, we talked about the 21 moments for the halving Bitcoin. And El Salvador was number one, and Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy was number two. So I said, hey, you are second best, and I had to look at him in the crowd. He's just like, I'm presenting it. The whole conference is like looking right at me. I'm like, oh man, that did not go over well. I was if you even watch how I presented, I was like, oh shit, man, I'm getting a little nervous. And I kind of made comments about the AI art. So trying to show some joking love. And I was like, I don't know how to read this situation here. So yeah. And once again, he's committed. I think the thing to respect about him is, he could have left the game, CEO, had all the money he could ever want, and he really took a massive bet on Bitcoin. So he is definitely one of the biggest fighters for it, but, we don't have to agree with everything he says, and that's okay.
Yeah, little inside baseball. I expect the, strategy world this year conference to be huge and a lot of hoopla, but last year it's seemingly just a few hundred people or a couple hundred people, honestly, at max, and Saylor would sit right in the middle of the audience and stare at you. So I can totally understand, because it was this whole conference, right? It was this whole AI conference for the whole company. And then in the corner, there's this Bitcoin for Corporations section. And Saylor's always, he felt like he was in there almost exclusively.
Look, they're a big company, and this was the conference they put on every year. And so they committed that space. And obviously that's why we partnered with Bitcoin for Corporations, Bitcoin Magazine. We wanted to, as a media arm, and what I tried to also build Bitcoin Magazine at the time as was, we're a media arm that can be covering other events. We don't just need to cover the Bitcoin conference. So I really built that out as the live product that I built out was to showcase that, to report on these other things. And, Bitcoin for Corporations is just one example of all the legwork that we put into it that, paid off as now, look, here's almost a channel or a show or a division, however you want to look at it. They can focus on educating corporations about Bitcoin, because the biggest issue we faced at Bitcoin Magazine was you have to inform so many different groups of people. So going back to the same way that you might not be able to read how Michael Saylor is talking about this, that's one audience that you have to talk to. Then you have to talk to a new audience of no coiners that are just interested in getting involved in it. Then you have to talk to, I love Shinobi to death, but Shinobi has his face covered. He's I would consider him a good friend. I still have no idea what he looks like, and that's totally okay. You have that group that wants to talk about secrecy and privacy. So you have to talk to so many different groups when you talk to Bitcoiners. It's very hard for a media company to do that. So, we try to you try to build out those channels and build out the platform that kind of allow that to come together. But look, Bitcoin for corporations is going to be important for the corporate groups that need to have that conversation, that they don't feel alone when they're trying to do this. I mean, obviously, you guys, your product, right? There's a lot of people that want to tiptoe into this, and how can we as a company, not only put Bitcoin on our balance sheet, but how do I justify this to my boss? Because as you know, the Fight Club element of it, where there's someone in every company that's a Bitcoiner, how can they kind of get the rest of their company to adopt it? That's great for Bitcoin corporations, but then you need PubKey because you need to have the the celebration angle of it, or we've seen a bunch of dads bring their kids to the bar, be like, look, these are real Bitcoiners. Like, this happens a lot of like sons bring their dads, like, Dad, I'm not wasting all my time and money, like this is the right investment, so like I feel like you the same way you bring a date home for the first time to your parents, like PubKey's that for some of these people to show like this is a real thing and a real movement.
Exactly. And like you said, there's a lot of overlap with Acropolis in that way, because it seems like at every company there's this crazy Bitcoiner, but if you have sophisticated people coming from the outside saying, hey, we have data to actually prove that this is a creative strategy, this is a good idea, sometimes that's all it takes, whether it's in the professional setting or the social setting. Moving on from that, and by the way, great job with that conference. I really enjoyed it. It was probably one of my favorites that I've ever been to. But my question is now, over the next year, what do you think the biggest surprise in Bitcoin will be? Do you have any particular suggestions or predictions?
The biggest surprise in Bitcoin. The biggest surprise in Bitcoin. I would say the biggest surprise in Bitcoin will be the large banks that will all of a sudden act like this was always a great bet, and that smart, and how they're going to do a total 180 on this. That is I think what's in the works. For too long, how long Chase has made you feel like a villain for buying Bitcoin, and I say that as a surprise. Not that
Chase Bank, not Chase Palmieri. Chase Bank.
Yes, right. I thought that was your dad's company. So
my alter ego.
Yeah. I think that it's always been surprising how many of them have not adopted this. I know that there was always employees within these companies that were trying to push for it. If you look, the best thing I used to do at BM is I would look at the job applications at these large banks, and there was a lot of blockchain people, and I would see people I knew were smart would be working on this like private blockchain stuff. Man, nothing really has come out of any of those things. I think that now there's been a tremendous amount of work by folks that have gotten traditional banks to semi-embrace this, but with the regulations kind of falling apart, they don't want to be the one that's left behind. So whether it's Bank of America or Chase, so getting these big banks to adopt it will give a certain amount of credibility, and then they're just going to rewrite how they've always looked at it. And I want to hold them accountable for everyone that they kicked off. Now, I think that'll be the most surprising to everyone else about how they'll do a 180. It's not the thing I look forward to the most, or the thing will be the coolest, but I think that's going to be a huge, massive turning point.
100%. We agree there. Okay, so this next section, we've gotten really great feedback from the audience. They love it. So hopefully you'll, bear with us for it, but it's a speed round. And what's interesting about the speed round is not only do we get to hear kind of your quick take on multiple things within a couple minutes, and it makes for a great clip, but what's really interesting is then we get to see like, oh, wow, that answer actually surprised us, and it lets us go a little bit deeper on some of those questions for the rest of the pod. So Mason and I are going to kind of jump back and forth every couple here, but are you ready? You up for it?
You want sound bites. So what you're saying is you want to make good sound bites. I get it. Okay, I'm up for it.
Let's make those sound bites together. Okay. All right, here we go. True or false? Fiat and Bitcoin will always coexist.
True.
Which model do you prefer? Stock to flow or power law?
Neither.
There are roughly 19,845,000 Bitcoin in circulation. What's more scarce today, Bitcoin or Bitcoiners?
Bitcoin.
Would you consider MSTR common stock a scarce asset?
No.
So Bitcoin's Mount Rushmore is in constant motion, but what three people would you put next to Satoshi today?
I put the three people next to him. Mount Rushmore. I would put Laszlo up there. I would put Adam back, and I would put Donald Trump, because if you get Donald Trump, you'll get the funding for it, and a lot of people will show up. So, and then we'll sell tchotchkes for it. So, less about what he's actually done for Bitcoin, but more for the marketing of the other people.
Okay, and maybe it's one of those folks, but who do you think is the most underrated Bitcoiner today?
Who's the most underrated Bitcoiner today, or in the history? Like you're talking about
Ever, yeah, most underrated ever for what they've done for the space.
I think Laszlo.
True or false, every U.S. presidential election from now on will have candidates from every party competing to win the Bitcoiner vote.
That is the biggest 100% true thing out there, and not just the U.S. presidential elections, but every single other presidential election. Bitcoin will now be a question that has to be answered, like gun laws and abortion.
How long until Bitcoin passes gold's market cap?
Don't care. We were never fine with gold.
True or false, Bitcoiners will procreate faster than any other demographic going forward?
True.
True or false, Trump understands Bitcoin?
True.
If the U.S. government currently holds roughly 200,000 Bitcoin, how many will they hold at the end of 2025?
I think they have a lot less than 200,000. So I think they have a lot less than 200,000, and they're not going to be able to get 10% past what they have at the end of 2025.
All right. So thanks for that. That was the speed round. Mason, were there any answers that jumped out at you in particular? I mean, he said,
I think
they're not.
Laszlo is a good one. I think not a lot of people who have entered the space recently know who Laszlo is and know his importance. So maybe we could opine a little bit on that.
Yeah. So, look, everyone knows Laszlo for Bitcoin Pizza Day, right? And that just gets brought up once a year, right? Oh, look at this guy. And unfortunately, they look at it as almost like a negative way. Like, this guy spent $30 million on pizza. What an idiot, right? Or like, does he regret this? Well, number one, he was one of the early folks within Bitcoin. He, built, worked on it on a lot with mining, right? Like mining from home computers was, had done a lot in the early days. And to be very honest, Pizza Day was not about trying to spend Bitcoin. That was like the most generous act in Bitcoin. Like that was a generous act of like trying to get more Bitcoin out into the ecosystem, right? And be willing to almost like kind of give that up. It was actually generosity. And whether he realized it or not, having it bought with pizza, which is something that globally everyone, looks at as some, this it's a community food, right? Like pizza is a very unique food that's unlike any other. It's globally that people, something enjoy. And it was there to kind of, feed his family. And he was willing to put his face on it, right? In this early movement. A lot of people in Bitcoin still don't put their face on it. I would say he also probably has to sacrifice a lot of his personal life. He doesn't get to be in the space the way he wants, because people either think he has, if you look at a lot of the early Bitcoiners, they've had to, they spend time in it and then they kind of like go into hiding because everyone thinks they have all this Bitcoin and it's a lot of pressure. So, he was willing to kind of put his face out there, a very genuine person. That, once again, there's a charitable element to what Pizza Day is. So it's like kind of building that. I mean, I think of Pizza Day as our Thanksgiving, right? So building that tradition, having the foresight to know it was that important. If you looked at some of his early work, how he talked about it, was a very positive person, I think was important for the movement that not only had the technical side, but, you say about Bitcoiners having more kids. It was someone who had family at the end of the day, was trying to put food on his table for his family. I mean, it really emphasized, I think, the message there. And it's something that resonates to this day. Like, as much as we get excited about the white paper day, The news doesn't give a shit about white paper day. They don't talk about it, but pizza day is this cultural thing that brings it together. So, I think he actually had both a technical achievement, an economic achievement, financial achievement, and then the cultural achievement. So he had the trifecta of, of what he's done for Bitcoin.
Absolutely. Chase and I, this question came from Chase and I chatting about this internally last week. And I had Ross on mine sort of for the same idea of giving Bitcoin a use case, one of its first major use cases. But yeah, even I forgot about Laszlo. So shout out to Laszlo. Mike, this has been a great conversation. I think now is a good time to wrap. Before we do, I just want to encourage anyone who's listening to the pod to like, follow, subscribe, rate the show, do whatever you got to do to help us out in the algorithm, because like Mike said, the most important thing arguably right now in Bitcoin is educating normal people and having conversations that normal people can listen to and take something from. I think on this show, we try to do a lot of people like Mike and people like Eric Semler and Dylan LeClaire, and we sort of try to hit the whole gamut of personalities. So if you found this helpful, would really appreciate if you showed some engagement. But Mike, let's also let them engage with what you're working on. So where can they find you on socials?
Yeah, you can find me on socials, and I was obviously on social before Bitcoin, so I use my name, Mike Germano. So you can find me on any social as Mike Germano, and more importantly, PubKey. So find us on social, but more importantly, find us in a town near you, at a bar near you, and come celebrate with other Bitcoiners. And when the bear market hits, come commiserate with other Bitcoiners with us.
Absolutely. Next time I'm in New York, I will definitely be there. The FOMO is getting too vast.
Good. Well, I'll invite you. First beer's on me. Next 10 are on you.
Cheers.
Cheers. Take care.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the show. Quick reminder that New Foundations is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing should be construed as investment, financial, or legal advice. Business owners, business operators, and those who are Bitcoin curious, let's connect. Visit AcropolisTreasury.com to learn more or to get in touch with our team.